And today is March 23rd, 2026. We are in the week of Parshat Tzav, but we are uh, close to we're less than 2 weeks before Pesach now. So we're going to devote this class to Passover, and we're going to devote the theme of this class, to the modalities of telling. The modalities of telling. I became very interested in this question of how we tell stories and the different ways specifically we tell the Passover story based on really the first paragraph in the Haggadah. And I'm going to put that up for us so that we can see that inside. Of course, we are all pretty much familiar with this. It's such an evocative passage. I spoke about it in Shul this past Shabbat, starting with the words Avadim Hayinu, and just to refresh what I said, Avadim Hayinu is an opening that even if you put three dots there, it almost begs a question out of you. Where is this going to take us? We were once slaves. So I sketched out possibilities which include Avadim Hayinu, and the song. The song is Ata B'nei Chorin. We are now free people. So it takes us. It took modern, and I'm going to write a little essay about this because I think it's really fascinating. There's a composer, a farmer composer named Shalom Potalsky, or Postalsky, I think his name is Potalsky, who immigrated from Poland to Israel, Palestine, in the 20s, and lived on Kibbutz Ein Charod in the north. And as many people who were inclined to musically, they saw themselves as the vanguard of the musical culture of Israel, and began to compose melodies and put poems, traditional texts, and set them to music. And Avadim Hayinu is one of those melodies. And I mentioned this in Shul this past Shabbat. I said, you don't need to be a musicologist really to figure out the time and date of that melody, because it sounds very much like the early Zionist songs. Avadim Hayinu Hayinu. Almost sounds like Shavtem Mayim Bisason Mimaynei Yishu Artzadinu La La La. So these are songs and melodies that are very familiar to us from the 30s, 40s, 50s, but not much beyond that. And they made their way into, the educational curricula of diaspora Jewry through a very an easy route, which was that many of the Hebrew teachers, Judaica teachers in schools like I went to, were Israeli, or they came from Israel. They had formal training educationally in Israel, and they brought the music with them. And of course, the World Zionist Organization, the Histadrut, etc., were providing all sorts of material through to educators throughout the world at that time. So we have these melodies here. Anyway, it takes us in a certain direction. And another direction is the direction of Deuteronomy. The Avadim Hayinu is, we are here and we are telling this story. We are sitting here, and it's good for us to do this, etc. So here is the text. Again, the text goes like this: Avadim Hayinu lefaro b'Mitzrayim. We are slaves to Egypt. We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. V'yotzienu Adonai Eloheinu misham. God took us out of there. B'yad chazakah, with a strong hand and outstretched arm. Ve'ilu lo hotzei HaKadosh Baruch Hu od avotenu Mitzrayim. So this is where the Haggadah goes, which is, it goes to, had we not been taken out of Egypt, we would still be there. It's a preposterous claim, but we would still be there. Uh, We'd still be slaves. So there would be no history. It's such an outlandish claim. Nothing matters, but God's intervention matters the most, and we would still be slaves. Even if we were all wise, we were all brilliant, we were all elders, and we knew the Torah. Here's the punchline: Mitzvah aleinu l'saper b'yetziat Mitzrayim. I'll just hold this up here because this is really the payload. It's our commandment, l'saper b'yetziat Mitzrayim. Now, I've been meditating, thinking about this unique use of grammar, basically, l'saper b'yetziat Mitzrayim, and I've come to the conclusion that the be means about, okay, but it also means, it gives you the sense of be is in. L'saper be, I'm going to tell about Yetziat Mitzrayim. I'm going to tell it about being inside Yetziat Mitzrayim, or wherever you want to go with this. I just want to stop and then ask, well, wait a second. That's very interesting. It's very interesting that it's the mitzvah, as we know, is to relate or recount the story of Egypt. But it occurs to us that there are many ways to tell a story. And in fact, could it be that some of the terms that are used in the Haggadah and elsewhere reflect different modalities of telling? And if we understand that there are different modalities of telling, how could it enhance our experience of the telling of the story? Okay, so this is the payload line. It is a commandment upon us to tell the story of the Exodus, and then of course it says, which is the ultimate story about how one ought to enjoy, embellish, wax creative, elaborate upon, and it's the invitation. This line, this is the invitation for talking, for narrative, for storytelling, for loquaciousness, for non-stop talking, right? You are invited. All those who engage and increase and elaborate on the story, this is praiseworthy. And so we have many traditions that evolve from even those few words, which include staying up all night and telling the story all night, till you, so that you're awake all the time. Now, I always say it's very nice to have this as the main purpose. The mission statement of the Haggadah is to embellish the story, but there's a limit, isn't there? Is there a limit to how long you can stay up? I mean, people do get hungry, and people do need to go to bed, and people need to go to the shul in the following morning. So, as much as I would like to stay up all night, as older as I get, I'm not sure I want to stay up all night. And besides, I have to come to shul the following morning, and we have to elaborate on the story, but it doesn't mean that we have to, lose sleep completely. Although some people would disagree with me on this. So when it comes to storytelling, we have these, a bunch of different modalities that are already in texts, and they're already in the Haggadah in different forms. And I don't have the systematic presentation of this that I would like to have, and there I would because of the baby this morning, it took me away a little bit from this preparation, but I have the rudiments of these different modalities. First, Alana, go ahead.
ביציאת מצרים, I just want to say something that instead of על יציאת מצרים, about אני מאמין בביאת
Be,
המשיח.
sure,
So it's
yes.
the same style of ב.
So that's I mean that's correct that the use of the bet it's technically a preposition, and it has as many prepositions have. They have multiple ways of being interpreted, and one of them is, it's so hard, I think, as a translator into English to hear it, because we're so used to thinking of bit as inside something, bitoch, inside the essence of it. Ani nichnas. No, I wouldn't say. I would do nichnas el, right? What would be a good sentence for bit? Ani olech. No, ani olech le. Ani שמתי את זה בתוך, שמתי את המכתב בתוך המעטפה. I put the letter inside the, בתוך is a where, no, give me an example.
הייתה בירושלים.
בירושלים, לשנה הבאה בירושלים, perfect, okay? So next year, בירושלים, in Jerusalem, perfect, okay. So now, we have the following. Okay, I'm going to show you a different modality of storytelling, which is the dominant modality. At least from in our ears, we hear this term, right? Vigadata. So I'm going to put Susie on the spot. We got Vigadata. Where do we get Vigadata? What's the quote me the verse?
Vigadata levincha.
Right? Vigadata levincha bayom hahu. You should lahagid. Okay. So what I want to do, and I don't want to. I mean, we were in front of, and I had a blackboard, I would go through a number of different sources, and try and demonstrate. This is the claim I'm going to make here, and I don't have the solid proof, but I am going to make the claim that in the word vigadata is informational. Okay, it is about what I communicate in terms of information, and here I'm going to show you what I do to try and make that point. Okay, I'm going to show you my tricks here. Okay, so I'm going to find the word in. I'm going to do this in a second. You got it, and I'll put it up and show you in a second. Okay. So I have my online programs, and here I'm going to share this with you. So look at Al Torah, and this is I typed in Vihigarata, and what I have is there are actually two times in the Tanakh where you have Higarata. And one was the verse that we quoted from chapter 13 in the book of Exodus, Vigarata levincha bayom hahu lemor bavur zeh asa Adonai li b'Mitzrayim. So that's the term. And I'm looking up that verse. This is chapter 13 and 8, verse 8 in the book of Exodus. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up that verse, and I'm going to show you all the different times that this verb takes place in the Tanakh, and we're going to do this way. Okay, here I'm going to share the screen now. This is chapter 13, and you see these are the list of the commandments of the telling. Here's Vigarata levicha. I'm going to press this word, and I'm going to get all the different times that Vigarata occurs in the Bible. But now I'm going to press and show all the different times that the shoresh, the root, occurs, and these are the different tabulations. So I'm going to look at the word, the occurrences of the root Vigarata, which is Heg or Nun Gimel Daled, to relate. I'm going to look at verses from the book of Breshit. I'm pressing here, and so I have all these different contexts. The first one is Vayomer mihigid lecha ki eromata. This is God speaking to Adam, who says mihigid lecha, who told you, and that means who told you that you were naked. So I'm going to define this as who provided the information to you. Number two is the instance of Cham, and when they find Noah sprawled out in his tent naked. Cham, Vayar Cham Avikanan, Cham sees his father's nakedness. Vayaged l'shnei achav bachutz. He tells his two brothers outside, meaning he communicates an information packet to his brothers. I'll give you another one. This is number 3. Vayikra Pharaoh Avram. When Abraham goes to Egypt the first time, Pharaoh and Abraham disguises his wife as his sister, and Pharaoh, all these misfortunes happen. Pharaoh says to Abraham, "What did you do to me? Mazot asita li." What did you do to me? Lama lo higarata li ki ishtechahi. Why didn't you tell me that she was your wife? And here my thesis is that Haggadah, in the narrowest sense of the usages that are implied in the Bible, is the passage, the transmission of information. Okay, I can give you one more. But mi'at hagidi na li hayesh bet avicha makom lanu. Who? This is good quizzing here. He said to her, "Whose daughter are you? Tell me, is there a place in your father's household for us to sleep?" That would be
Rivka.
good, right? Elisheva says this to Rivka when he goes and travels to Lavan's house, or to the Betuel household. And so every time you have lehagid, you have instances of information. Okay, that's my thesis. So then, one modality of telling the story is to communicate the information of the story, and in the most concrete terms, I would say that part of telling the story of the Exodus is to tell facts, or at least make up the facts that you want to tell the story. Now, I would say what are as we define them, what are the facts of the story, or what are the essential components of the story? The essential components of the story are, well, we were slaves in Egypt, and God took us out of Egypt, and brought us to freedom. And the facts of the story are, the elements of the story are, we became a people in Egypt. We descended to Egypt as tribes, or as the sons of Jacob, and that's where the people became a people, etc. And so what you are doing in the telling, as far as Haggadah is concerned, is you are relating, I guess, for lack of a better term, the historical narrative of the experience. This took place in this way, and we are here to tell that story. I would make the analogy, if we had a comparative analogy to make in terms of American Independence Day or Israeli Independence Day, and had a Haggadah, you would say, what's the story here? The story is that there were 13 colonies, and they declared their independence from Great Britain, and they rebelled against a tyrannical government, etc., etc. John, go ahead.
Well, in terms of the story, no mention of Moses. God took us out. Moses was there.
Yes,
Moses was
indeed.
paid.
Okay, so we have a deliberate move here in the Haggadah to kind of eliminate Moses from the telling, which ought to be the thing that makes us curious. Why does the Haggadah do this? And I think the easiest reason to point to is that the Haggadah doesn't want us to deify Moses. There is this tension. My colleagues talk more about this than me on our Parsha talks. There is a tension in the Torah itself of Moshe Ish HaElohim, Moses, man of God, and when you have an important figure who has miraculous abilities or who is an agent for this, there may be a tendency to deify that individual, or at least exalt that individual to the point that the individual is an object of worship. And Judaism, the Bible especially, has a big problem with this. We don't have sainthood in Judaism for that reason, and not that we want to disparage any other. We're just saying it as a characteristic of let's say Christianity or Catholicism. The fact that there are exalted individuals who are saints and who become in themselves objects of reverence and even worship, such that you would invoke a saint in order to effectuate a certain kind of outcome, right? So there's a patron saint of fishermen, a patron saint of country, a patron saint of health care, etc., etc. And in the system of Catholicism, this works, but for Jews and Judaism, this was too close to going too far and making an object of worship. And so I think the rabbis are not only reluctant to put Moses in there, but they are adamant that he not be in there, lest he become the object of worship, taking us away from the worship of the one to whom all gratitude is due for this great event. Okay, so yes, Marlene, go ahead. You have to unmute.
Amalach hagoel oti, what we say at night, that we beg the angels to watch and take us.
So we're not immune from this. I want to say here's what we love about Judaism. Okay, as much as I would say we have such a powerful instinct against idolatry, we're also part of the world, and we're also human beings, and this is a feature of humanity. This is a part of our anthropology, that we will revere things that are or things that transcend us and move us. And I don't have to go far to find examples of this.
Fast if we drop a Torah.
That's a perfect example
Don't we
of
kiss
it.
the Torah when it comes around?
Yes, and
We
so
face it, we bow to it.
I'm telling you, I honor those, including myself, who have a certain reaction to that. It's not that I do or don't. I behave reverentially around it as a gesture. But I'm very aware when the Torah comes around that when you place a tallis corner on it and kiss the tallis, you're in a gray zone. Okay, what I would do, and I'm very conscious of this, and thank you for bringing it up. When the Torah comes around and I place my corner of the tallis, I don't kiss the corner of the tallis, but I do have in my mind that I am aware of the contents of this, and I am making a physical gesture of acknowledgement and signing on. A perfect example of this also is the mezuzah. Do you know what I've done? I have to show it to you, and I've showed it in the other class. I've framed the mezuzah so that the text is visible, and I have it, somewhere near the entrance of my house. Of course, I have a mezuzah on my door, but when you walk in the house, on the side, one of the walls beside it, the entrance, I have a frame mezuzah. And do you know, I have much more awareness of the spirituality that is intended by the text by seeing the text, by actually having a momentary, like a millisecond interaction with the text. I walk beside the text, Shema Yisrael, and I go like, yeah, we're communicating. And so that's the point of it. Now, that instinct, which is reverence, is part of every human being. And it's natural to exalt in things and people that are extraordinary. Look, I mean, you go to any performance. I had so much fun at, I went to the Hazamir choir choral performance last week in Manhattan. Wow, what an amazing thing. These young kids who are singing and lots of veterans who are singing, and they had soloists doing some part, I forget the pieces already. Wow, these were amazing voices, and you sit in awe and you listen to a voice that is so polished, professional, musical, technical. I mean, from every point, and you just go like, what a talent here! This is amazing, and it becomes a joy to watch. Now, I'm not saying we worship that, okay, but it's a very, very small step when you see excellence and you see such celebrity to really be engaged by that. We have awe for people who are extraordinary, and we have a certain way of reaction to that. In religious circles, this is very true when it comes to certain rabbis and of course Hasidic rabbis, and the way that people demonstrate their awe and affection and reverence for them. It's part of the anthropology of that community. Marlene, go ahead.
So then is song a second modality after Hagid?
Indeed, you're jumping ahead, but let's go. Let's go there. All right, it's in my list here. So back to Haggadah. Haggadah, I'm saying in the narrowest sense, is informational content transmission of story. That is to say, the facts, ma'am. Give me the facts. Okay, let's go on. And here we go. Back to. So we have Haggadah and Vigadata. But before we get to song, and song is one of mine, we have Amarta. And here I'm going to take a very narrow and precise meaning of Amarta. Of course, Amira is talking, okay? But Amira is also, and here I don't want to stretch it too much, but I want to give a very narrow. Amira is about reading, or that would be kri'ah, is speaking it or declaring it or enacting or simply declaiming what is written in front of you. Okay, so and I'm going to put it up for another 3 seconds. Okay, and I'm going to close the screen here for a second. It's the usage of the word leman te'amer et yetziat Yisrael, or whatever it is, to speak about it, but it's also I'm following a script. Okay. And part of the modality, and I think it's very rich, and at least I get a lot of meaning out of it. And I think that many people get a meaning out of it. The idea that you're sitting with a script. I mean, I have all my Haggadot here. This is beautiful classic Haggadah. I'm gonna write a little essay about this also, but about these. You got it there too. These were extraordinary contributions to American Jewish culture, because what they did was they mass produced a very simple, unadorned, this very simple, illustrations to the Haggadah. They made it.
Vegans not drink coffee. You didn't use Maxwell House.
I have the Maxwell House on the shelf also, and you do too. So there. So what they did was they gave you the script, and Ilana will confirm, and any others will confirm that you can take next week, God willing, when they publish the edition of Ma'ariv or Yediot Achronot, these are the largest papers in Israel. I guarantee that the weekend edition of the largest editions of Ma'ariv and Yediot Achronot and who knows what else will include the Haggadah. It's amazing. Okay, how many pieces of newsprint does a Haggadah take? Not many, maybe 8 full folios of newsprint, and these newspapers do it as a service, the same way that Maxwell House provided it, free if you only bought, a couple of cans of Maxwell House. These are marketing things, and these are things that just are so appreciated by a public that doesn't necessarily have, shelves and shelves of Haggadot in their own personal libraries. You and I must have about 40 or 50 different editions of the Haggadah. I collect 1 or 2 every year. And, I read them and use them and find whatever I can in them. Most people don't do that, okay? Let's be honest. But they'll take from the newspaper. Anyway, the script is a way of telling the story. And we get a certain degree of satisfaction having done the script completely. Of course, we pause and stop and we do our symbolic actions and sing our songs. But the knowledge that we've done all or part of the script, I think, is deeply satisfying, and that is a part of telling. Okay, it is the recitation of the story following a certain script. I'm going to go on and share, unless anybody has a question here. Okay, I don't see any hands.
Well,
Okay.
just let me
Go
mention
ahead,
thing
Stanley.
here. The other side of it, in terms of you're talking about following the script, I remember Neil Gilman gave a series of lectures at the temple. He
Yes,
probably was one of your professors.
sure.
And incidentally, he was a friend of our cousin, Nahum Gelber. They both
Okay.
grew up in Quebec City before
City.
coming to Montreal. But anyway, he talked about the Haggadah. It was very interesting. And he says, you don't daven the Haggadah, is the way
Yeah.
he put it, that you embellish it. You can tell the story in different ways and so on. So, you can emphasize the script, but there's also elaborating.
It's such a great point, because many people do daven Haggadah.
That's right. They think it's canonized, it's like the Chumash, but it's not.
Absolutely. There's a liturgical function to the words too. Ilana, go ahead. You have to unmute yourself. The space bar, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
2 more words from the שורש נ"ג ד', מגדת עתידות, a fortune teller.
Interesting. Okay, so
So
that's
it doesn't say אומרת עתידות, מגדת עתידות,
nice.
and also נגיד, a very important personality, נגיד. I don't
Yes.
know if you're familiar with this.
Sure, the Nagid is the prince and a person who may have this information. I think though those are very valuable. Yes. Okay, let's go on. So we have Haggadah and Amirah, okay? And Lissaper. Lissaper is storytelling. Okay, and I could do the same exercise. I'm not going to do, the concordance on you again. But part of what part of the fun in studying is, okay, so Lissaper, where do you think this verb happens in the Torah? And I'll cut to the chase. You get a lot of Lissaper in the story of Rebecca and the Abraham's servant, and they tell him everything, and I go back to that story all the time because it's an amazing example of storytelling, and you get the picture of character and setting and nuance and all that stuff. It's just magisterial in terms of storytelling. And so what this means is that when of course you can see that I get very animated when I talk about storytelling, But this I latch into this, okay, which is, yes, on the one hand, I of course can be talking about information content and transmission of information, facts. Of course, I want to be able to recite liturgy, in the sense of, here's my script and I want to go, follow the script and go off the script and improvise from time to time. But what I really want to do is I want to take, my child, my grandchild, and I want to say, do you know what happened in Egypt? Let me tell you, I was there, and that's embellishment of story and storytelling. And that, as an art form, of course, that's what we live on. We all live on the basis of that interaction. And in that interaction, what I'm doing is I'm really conveying the contents of my imagination. So when I'm going to borrow the line later in the Gada, you have to imagine, you have to see yourself as if that's the invitation to imagination. And that imaginative modality is really the expressive modality of storytelling that allows us to inhabit our imaginations, and like I do this by seeing what's in my head, and I see and I try and illustrate this with word pictures and give the music of my voice and my enthusiasm in transmitting a whole experience. L'saper then is not about facts and it's not about liturgy, but it's the emotional experience of this that I'm communicating so that my audience is able to create their own picture. Susie, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was thinking about this before. This is not syntax, but when you say "L'saper b'tziat Mitzrayim," that kind of evokes the Chayav Adam L'Rot Eretzmo, because you can say, inside the Yetziat Mitzrayim.
So that's where I'm inclined to go, even though, and here I want to kind of,
it's midrash.
It's midrash. It's not the precise grammatical meaning of the text. The text it's more like what we said, tell about Egypt. But if I allow myself the license of expansive interpretation, I would say absolutely. This is about immersing yourself in the environment and seeing yourself as if. Okay, so I have 3 sorts already modalities. Let's go to another one. I have 8 here. So I would have loved to have just 7, but I have 8. Okay, she'ela, right? So this is interesting. What is and you can see, this so rich, the content of this whole theme. What is involved in in telling that is communicated by questions? What does the question do? Now the question can function as a form of defining, or a form of refining information, but questions in the context of storytelling are often challenges, and they're challenges in the sense that, from the very simple, is they are challenging your rendition of things, or they could even challenge your authority. There is a meta, there's something going on when you ask a question. I'll give you my favorite example of this, and I'll just close here, which is, the example is when you say to your child, clean your room, and the child says, why? Okay. Well, the why of a child is a challenge to the whole political structure of your family. It's a challenge of authority, and look how it is unsettling. Look how you after the question is uttered, you have to re-establish an equilibrium of information and move yourself to a new understanding, a new relationship. Okay. Now, most of us, I would say, like 100% of the time, not even fractions of percent, we never think about it in terms, because it's so natural for us to have these kinds of interactions. No one's thinking about the political dynamics when you ask a question, except when you become aware of it, right? Because, a parent is likely to feel challenged by the child asking the question. Likewise, the master, and here I'm using these technical terms, and the Talmid, the Rav and the Talmid, when the Talmid asks the master a question, the Rav a question, it's not only for refinement, but it may have at its core a usurpation of authority or a challenge to authority. It may have a political dimension to it. So I read this little verse here, which is, it's from the Mishnah here. They pour him the second cup. This is, when chapter 10 in the Mishnah of Pesachim describes what an early Seder was, you recited the Kiddush, and then you have a servant pour you your second cup of wine, and then it says, V'chan haben shoel aviv. And this is when the son asks the father, or the child asks the parent. And what does the child ask the parent? Ma nishtana halayla ze mikol halaylot. The Mishnah has its own version of this, subtly different from our version. We are, of course, familiar with the 4 questions. And we know that the 4 questions are not questions about content necessarily, but they're questions about, at the very core, they're questions of generational continuity here. They're questions of, what does this matter for me? I mean, the Bible anticipates this. When you come into the land and do this ritual, your children are going to ask you questions. Mazot, what is it that you're doing? That's a challenge to your authority, and that's a challenge to everything. I mean, it's almost like saying, why are you bothering with this? And we have lots of different forms of this question, even today. Part of the intergenerational dialogue in American Jewry today is the dialogue over Israel. I mean, it's a very profound, subject, very difficult subject for many people to talk about because they just don't have the mastery of it. They have emotional content to it. They love and they are feeling so, loyal to Israel, and their children and their grandchildren, see Israel in such a different way. We have this disconnect between generations, and I have it in the shul. Many people, are anguished about this question because their children and their grandchildren don't care or at the very least don't care, and sometimes even worse, are openly hostile, and that's there. We hear the question, and the question comes with hostility to it. So Susie.
Yeah, so I was at so Torah in Motion had like a half a day yesterday, and so I don't remember who said it, but one of the teachers was saying that the Manash Tanah is examples of things that people might ask. If this is this like you've had a few things going on at the Seder, so this is the point at which one might ask questions, and then Manash Tanah is examples of what one might ask. But I have to relate. Years ago, I invited a friend of mine from work and her young family to our Seder, and there was a 2-year-old who was in his sassy seat, so his eye level was like right across the table, and we was just before the 4 questions, and this little boy is sitting there sucking on his parsley, looks up at the table and said, "Why?" And it was just like this perfect moment.
A perfect point. So it kind of unsettles everything there. Good point. John, go ahead.
Well, speaking about the question as a challenge, when they talk about the 4 children, I never liked this. The second one, they call him wicked. Wicked. I never thought it says, I don't think he's wicked. I think it's a reasonable question. I think maybe now people are rethinking that.
Well, sure, and again, there are different versions of it. We have to look at the Mishnah to see what it says here, also. But why would they call him wicked? And that becomes the question on the question, and here I would hone in on the one piece of sensitivity here, which is the rabbis are sensitive to the collective nature of the whole experience, and that the question, as unsettling as it is, uh, smacks of uh, dilettantism, and I am taking myself out of the community, and you can see why the rabbis, really have a pejorative term for this, because they are seeing this kind of this question not only as a move of challenge, but also as rebellion, and really at the border of being a traitor to the community, right? The worst thing that you can do to any group is betray that group, and the person who takes themselves out of the group, is the one that you are most sensitive to, because they know where all the secrets are, and they can actually do a great amount of damage, and that is true in Jewish history for people, and there's a kind of subtext here, which is that we are aware that we contain within us the possibility of people who will leave the community, and in so leaving justify their leaving based on the peculiarities of the community, and really criticize the community that's light, or really endanger the community. So that's where the Rasha sensibility is, I think. And of course, the answer to that is no. That's not the way you should react to that. The Rasha is still at the table. Don't call him Rasha. And I agree with your sensibility here, John. That person needs to be part of the conversation. You're not going to make the person into something else, but what you need to do is validate the question. And so, at the very least, Agadah validates that individual's question by giving that person a seat at the table.
Right,
So,
because when you call him wicked, you end the dialogue.
true, you do, but so we leaders have the responsibility to soften that, to mollify that, and to do an exercise in, well, what are you really asking? Where are you coming from with that question? And let's put that question inside the whole. I mean, boundaries are important in terms of for communities. What constitutes a boundary for for Jewish peoplehood, and that's very sensitive. It's a very sensitive conversation. It used to be, I'll give you. It used to be that intermarriage was a boundary. Not anymore. And but what constitutes betrayal of a community now? That I think is a very interesting, because once you answer that question, you are defining what the limits of the community are. Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, Rabbi, I don't know if you'll be coming to this, but I heard a class from another rabbi who was talking about what should be the mood of the persons telling the story and those listening to the story,
Yes.
in terms of seriousness, joy, and how does that play into the telling process?
Well, so I far be it for me to both regulate and legislate people's moods at the Seder. It is whatever it is. The Seder itself consists of all of these different, emotions and experiences, which would include, joy and sadness, memory and elation, jocularity. I mean, it's meant to be a total experience, I think. And of course, depending on our personalities, we can gravitate to some over the other. I mean, and it depends on the year also. It depends who you have at the Seder. I mean, certainly I've had experiences where, you can't engage in serious Talmudic discussions with the people present at your Seder, because they're just not inclined to that, and those kinds of conversations require a certain, valence to these texts. But most people will appreciate humor and play, and most people will appreciate song and melody, and most people will appreciate creativity. When I get really going at this, I write lots of different sketches, and I've put different people on trial at the Seder with a script of a courtroom, I think those, there are lots of different forms. I've had, at our public seders, I've done, the Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer. I had a whole skit about the Situation Room at the Exodus with Wolf Blitzer interviewing Pharaoh and Moses and whatever. I actually met Wolf Blitzer. Wolf Blitzer was an honorary doctorate at my daughter's graduation from the seminary. So I went over to him. He's actually very tall. I didn't realize how tall he was. I said, Wolf Blitzer, I made a character of you in for my script for Pesach. He was really, he got a good kick out of that. I said, you're a character in one of my skits, So, oh boy, that's great. So that's the point. The point is you can have a lot of fun. There's nothing wrong with having fun. You're supposed to have. That's one modality of storytelling. Although it's not my 8 modalities here, but we'll get to the rest of them in the last 5 minutes. Yeah, go ahead. Skip, go ahead.
Yes, Rabbi. It's interesting to me in the you look at the U.S. citizens, and we are polarized.
Yes.
And the thing that we're not addressing is respect for those who disagree with us. And that's important.
And I would just kind of funnel that into the Seder, which is that the Seder opens up the possibility. There you go. So perfect example. The Seder invites disagreement, and that actually leads us to the next modality here, which is darosh. V'doresh me'arami oveda. The Mishnah says a person should expound. So one way of teaching is interpreting and using text and going. And I know I'm running out of time, so I'm going to just kind of gloss over this. I'm going to go to the next one here, which is what we talked about: Hallel, praise, as telling, and song, and that singing is a form of storytelling. And you can spend a lot of time with AI now, and it's very dangerous because you can just go into all sorts of wormholes here. But I asked the question, how is song like storytelling? And of course, what AI, produced a whole thesis on this. Song is certainly there is a specific kind of song that is storytelling through song. Ballads are stories told in song. But for example, the B'tzeit Yisrael mi Mitzrayim, B'tzeit Yisrael mi Mitzrayim, which is a modern rendition, and we can do the musicology on that. When was it composed and what's it? But you don't even need to be musicology. That it's a 4/4 march time. Okay, Susie, join me here. So it's very you already get an emotional setting of we are going from Egypt.
It's good word painting.
It's a good, beautiful Malecha Hayam, right? A certain kind of, that extended note which tells you that there's something coming to resolve it, and more and more and more. And it's just joy. It's just perfect joy. And I enjoy, we sit around the table and we sing these songs, and it's just beautiful joy. And the more voices, the Cholam Arbet Mishuba, it's beautiful. So one way to tell a story is to do it in settings of music. Let me go on, and I will talk about the following here. The following is, after praise, we get object lessons, okay? So I have matzah zu al tshuma, right? The pointing to objects at the Seder, and you're supposed to point to the Paschal Lamb, which is the Zroah, and the Seder, Rabban Gamliel at the end of the Seder, what is he doing there? He's saying, this is a memorial to this Korban Pesach. And that's sadness, by the way. The reason why I say it's sadness is because Passover in the temple, we have no way of appreciating this, but the phenomenal progression of pilgrimage and animals and sacrifice and and the whole barbecue of hundreds, thousands of animals, this is not only pageant, this is event. And and once the temple is destroyed, that's gone. And you can imagine the despair of that. And so what the rabbis say is you cannot touch it. You just point to it. Zecher, korban. It's in memorial. Imagine you have a memorial to a sacrificial animal on your table. Okay? What does that even mean? All right, but that's part of telling is I take objects and I use them to encode and also elicit conversation from them. Okay, give you another one here. All right. So la'asok is immersion. And I think, am I done here? Yeah, I think that's the last one. Immersion. Chayav adam la'asok bilchot Pesach kol halayla. So and here, this is an interesting modality of telling, which is the rules. Now there are certain people that are inclined to one form or another. I expounded before. I I like the rules and I like talking about the rules, but if I had a choice of how to use 45 minutes in my storytelling, I would probably not focus on the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, and focus more on, chapter 12 of the Book of Exodus, which is the story. Okay, and I would get very excited about this. But I understand that there are people who get excited about, when you add water to flour, it makes a dough, and the dough becomes something. That's very exciting too. And there's a way to analyze it, and the halacha of that. How much do you eat? What quantity of mar? And there are people who really have a certain degree of excitement because they see in the details of the rules narrative. I mean, they may not express it this way, but the joy of immersion in detail is a form of telling, the same way that we would maybe engage in law that way, or the same way that we would engage in any kind of procedure, and we talk about these things and they become the narrative itself. So I had then 8 modalities of telling, and they are, again, to review here, the tellings that are vigarata, the contents of information, ve'amarta, recitation, vayisaper, storytelling, she'ela, question answer, drasha, which is exposition and interpretation, halel, song and praise, zecher, which is object lessons with props, and lasok, which is immersion in the details of the rules. And I think those were 8. Okay. And that, my friends, constitutes the experience. And so, when I as a way of concluding, then I'll have questions. Which, when we say the more you tell the story, so you can interpret that and say, yeah, I should talk all night about the story, and that's fine. But I interpret it sometimes and say, the more modalities that you use to tell the story, what a great story it is to be told in all of these different formats. And the Seder opens itself up to the possibility of all of these different formats. Ilana, go ahead.
So from all the information, so much information that you gave us, it's interesting that they chose the name of the book, Haggadah, and not Sefer, and not Amira, and not all this, but they did choose it. They gave it the name of Haggadah, not Megillah, not Sefer, not. So is it because Lehagid is the more powerful?
I think that here's where I would go with that. Because the biblical command is V'yigarat levincha, So the rabbis are building on that mitzvah, and they're saying that the content is going to be called the Haggadah. Now the study of the history of the Haggadah as a book again is really, you can do a whole year course on how the Haggadah becomes a book and when it gets called Haggadah, at what stage. Not only is it about giving you a manual for conveying the information, but it really is to be understood in the widest, most expansive meaning. So yeah, they zeroed in on that. My hunch is that it's because of the Bigadat Levincha, also because in Rabbinic Hebrew or Aramaic, Agadah is legend. Agadita in Aramaic is the corpus of imaginative literature of the Jewish people. Agadah. Marlene Herman.
And in the morning, our prayer is Lahagid Baboker Chastecha.
Yes. Okay. So that's Tov Lehodot. That's from the Psalm for the Sabbath day. Lahagid Baboker Chastecha V'Mur. And what is it that you're proclaiming there, right? And Haggadah would be proclamation. And so where I would go in my narrow interpretation here is that I'm giving you the facts, ma'am. I'm relaying to you the facts of God's goodness, God's
But
kindness.
it's a relationship with God, because I can't tell a
100%.
story that I wasn't part of.
100%. So nice. That's a good little vort there, Marlene. Good vort there. Get a point there. John, go ahead.
My understanding is that the Seder is derived from Greek practice. They talk about the afikomen. I think it's a Greek word.
Yes.
Where does that fit in to your analysis?
Good question. So afikomen is the word for the post symposium drink fest, and the Seder, correctly, you are correct that the core of the Seder was based on a certain model that you had at Greek talking fests in symposia. The rabbis adopted that and rabbinized it to make it into a whole panorama of symbols and stories. And then they said, we're not going to let you go and have a post celebration here, because we don't want to engage in drunkenness, which is what afikomen was. And what they what originates as the post symposium drinking became concretized symbolized as the piece of matzah. You ate the piece of matzah, and the eating of that piece of matzah that we call the afikoman is the defining boundary moment between the end of the feast and you don't eat anything beyond that. You have restrictions beyond that. It's very interesting, because we like to say homiletically, the last taste in your mouth should be the taste of matzah. So then the question is, but come on, I'm gonna have a cup of tea, gonna have this, you're not gonna let me have a little piece of chocolate. I mean, after all, I bought all this chocolate, So again, how far do you take it? But the point is that it's the last thing that you eat is a boundary statement of where the eating ought to end, and not that the feasting and singing, because we do sing quite a bit afterwards. We just don't want to get drunk afterwards. And because drunkenness leads to mixed dancing. That's what you do not want. Actually, mixed dancing with other people's wives.
Abstinence from bread. It doesn't say abstinence from all other parts of life.
There's joy in all of that, but you can't. You just don't want to get too loosened up, right? Because again, these are things that destabilize communities. It's if you read the anthropology of Christmas, for example. I know I'm frozen. So what's the whole business of the mistletoe, right? The mistletoe is about the breaking of boundaries of hierarchies and also of relationship, that you can kiss anybody's wife, right? As long as they stand on the mistletoe. That in a moment of time, conventions of propriety and loyalty are suspended, and we give in to desire. Judaism doesn't want to go there. Nope. Sorry. No afikomen. No drinking. All right. We'll leave it there. So, folks, I'm going to just stop the pause here for the